How to extend a component's logic without duplication it or adding props that only exist for one specific scenario? That's one. How do you handle a business requirement where the original component has to stay untouched, but in one specific case you still need to prepare and format the data before passing it in? That's two. And if your answer sounded something like this, just copy the entire user card, call it admin user card, and put all the admin specific data formatting in there, or take the original user card, add an isadmin prop, and along the way, mix a generic card for any user with one very specific business scenario. Well, then this video is for you. Here I show you how one approach can help you avoid duplicates, keep your base component from turning into a god component, and still keep both the business and designers happy. Because one forgotten duplicate after redesign is all it takes for different version of the exact same UI to start living in your product. But before we keep going, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos. And definitely, drop your thoughts in the comments. I read and reply to every single one. Hello, my name is Eugene and I build frontend systems with a strong focus on architecture, scalability, and long-term maintainability. Today I'll talk to you about the pattern we usually call a wrapper, or in classic Gov terms, Decorator, adapted to a component-based approach. And this isn't gonna be some textbook breakdown, because I'm not a fan of theory for theory's sake. Instead, we're gonna look at the real product and architecture problems this approach solves, how much easier it can make your work, and, of course, do all that without making it painfully dry. And we're gonna start with the requirement. We already have a card component that displays a user's data, but now the business wants action buttons, things like open details or edit user, to show up only when the current user has the required permissions. But you know how this usually goes. We ask, how soon do we need this? And the answer is, as soon as possible. And suddenly, the temptation to grab the fastest solution just keeps getting stronger. But what solution? What the business wants is clear. They need it working and, preferably, done in as little time as possible. But what about development? We could pass a permission list through props and then use a regular if-else to show the right button or hide it. Or we could just copy the component, call it something like permission protected user card, and put the unique logic there. I mean, it's only used in one place, right? Yeah, every one of those options gets the job done fast, but we'd also be shooting ourselves in the foot. If we extend the props, it might look perfectly fine right now, but what happens over time, when we start solving every new requirement the same way? Today is permissions, tomorrow is specific business scenarios, and before long, we are joining variations, and hello, code component. And let's just forget the copy-paste option. The second we do that, we have a duplicate. Then later somebody needs to tweak, say, the body. One copy gets updated, the other one doesn't. And now the exact same component is still living somewhere with the old markup. And you already know how painful it is to maintain two copies of the same component, right? And this is exactly where a wrapper fits. For our case, it's honestly one of the fastest and least invasive solutions. First, we don't touch the wrap component at all, so it keeps its original responsibility. Second, we can layer whatever logic we need around it, and then just render the original component. But what is a wrapper exactly? In a component context, is a component whose job is to extend or add to the behavior of an existing component without changing its internals. And it does that literally by wrapping it. For our use case, let's look at two main ways to implement it. First, a wrapper built around one specific component. It knows that, say, UserCard lives inside it, runs some extra logic and then renders that exact component. When it makes sense, we can keep a compatible props contract and literally swap the original component for the wrapper without redesigning the external contract or the way data gets passed in. And this version is the closest to the classic Go description of Decorator. We keep a compatible contract but add new behavior around the existing component, which, you gotta admit, is pretty convenient. Second, a more abstract version. Here, the wrapper component comes in through children, so the wrapper doesn't even know what is rendering inside. It just applies some sheer logic around whatever it gets. An abstract permission guard is a good example. And this is where we start moving away from the classic Go decorator and into a looser component level interpretation of a wrapper. This version is especially useful when the same logic is assigned to one specific component and could apply to pretty much anything. For example, the wrapper can get the permission list, check conditions passed through props, and then decide whether to render children or show a fallback, say a message that the user doesn't have permission to view the content. So which one do we choose for our case? Well, first we gotta change the question a little. It's not really which one we want, it's which one actually fits. And to figure that out, let's go back to the requirement. It's very specific. Based on a condition, show or hide certain buttons. We are not hiding the whole card, we're just limiting the available functionality. So we're gonna create a new component called Access Control UserCard. We'll keep the props identical to the original, get the permission list inside, and then, based on the current user's permissions, determine which actions are available and pass them into the original user card through the slots that already exist. Then we just drop the new component into the same place. And here's the fun part. From the outside, almost nothing changes. We're still passing the exact same set of props. At most, the component name changes. And we can create as many of these wrappers as our business logic actually calls for. For example, back at the beginning of the video, we talked about creation and admin user card. Same analogy, same approach, same principles. With one difference. Here we are not getting permissions. We are preparing and formatting the incoming data for a specific admin scenario, then rendering the original user card again. And remember, a design pattern isn't some magic fix for every problem. It can solve your problem, or make it worse. The real skill is knowing where to use it and why. And that's exactly what this channel is all about. See you.